Hi, Tom from bknutrition.com, and today I want to talk about the best chest supersets for mass. Now, I was on the competitive circuit. I used to have one of the best chests on the circuit. I think that was mentioned by people, not just me. I always had a very good, well-developed chest, and ironically, I never did flat bench press, not much anyway, because I didn't like the way that the flat bench made my shoulder feel. I developed a shoulder injury, which was detrimental, and there wasn't helped by doing flat bench press. So I hardly ever did that exercise. So in order to develop my chest, I had to look around for different ways of doing it, different stimulus to hit on different angles that didn't aggravate my shoulder injury. And over the years of bodybuilding, I've been bodybuilding since I was 17. I'm 41 when I'm filming this video, so that's 24 years of training chest at least once a week. So I've got a fair knowledge of what works and what doesn't work. I've also coached hundreds of clients, PT'd hundreds of clients, and helped them to achieve a better, bigger, stronger chest. And so what I want to do today is just share some of those workouts and some of those exercises with you, and hopefully give you new ideas as to how to develop your own chest workout. Because most people I see going to the gym, because I own a gym if you didn't know, most people I see going into the gym, they tend to stick to the same chest exercises all the time, and that's quite boring. They tend to do flat bench, incline bench, maybe some flies, maybe a bit of cables, and then that's it. They just go home and they do that routine week in, week out, and then complain that they haven't seen any chest development. So I want to sort of give you some new ideas, some variations to put into your own chest workouts, and just bear in mind that I still do the compound stuff, the big compound. So I still do incline bench press, incline barbell bench press, incline dumbbell bench press. I still do things like floor press and those sorts of things. I still do the traditional chest building exercises. However, I like to throw in different variations, so I'm hitting the chest from different angles, different stretches, different range of movements, different volumes, in order to develop my chest as fully as I possibly can. And that's something I applied across my bodybuilding, and so my workouts are always very varied, and that's what I bring to my coaching now, to make people enjoy their workouts, always varied, and see massive improvements very quickly. So let's get into it. So the first superset that I would want you to try is the cable crossover and cable chest press superset. Now, these exercises do look very similar when you do them to the untrained eye, but now when you've seen people do them, you'll potentially see why they're doing them. The cable crossover and cable press superset generally tends to take a lot of the stress off the shoulder. Now, you can't do as much weight on this exercise, say, as you would say with like a dumbbell fly or a dumbbell press or a bench press, and there's very good reason for that, because then you have to really focus on the movement to get the tension across the muscle. Generally with a cable movement, if you're doing a crossover movement, if you overload the weight too much trying to hit this sort of personal best, then what you're generally going to do is hurt your shoulder. So I use this exercise to be able to focus the weight. Remember, with bodybuilding, it's the tension on the muscle that creates the failure signal. It's not so much having a heavy weight, although that's important. We need to have weight to stimulate failure. We also want to be stimulating the target muscle. And the problem I see a lot of people doing with traditional bench press movements is that there's a lot of tricep in there and there's a lot of shoulder or front delt in there. And so what they generally tend to do, these people, is they overload the weight, compensate with the front delt and the tricep, and then not stimulate the chest. So the cable crossover and the cable press superset will teach you how to target your chest properly. Now, the reason we do cable crossover first is because you're going to be stronger on the cable press movement. So if we did that one first, you would end up not getting as many reps on the cable crossover. Now remember, the cable crossover is to open up the chest here and to contract the chest inwards, and the cable press is to bring in the front delts and the triceps as well as the chest in order to get more compound movement. So the cable crossover essentially is potentially an isolation movement, if you want to call it that, whereas the cable press is a compound movement. But we still want to be making sure we're always concentrating on the chest. So when you're doing this movement, it's very important that you set yourself up right. So and a mistake I see people doing with this, with both movements really, is that they get the cables and then they walk about 4 paces forward out the cable crossover. What that means is that the cable is going to be pulling you back to such an extent it's potentially going to put more pressure on the shoulders. You only need to step 1 foot forward to get that slight angle, so you're getting that slight pull on the chest, in order to create that pull across the chest. Any more than that, you're going to be fighting the machine pulling you back, which is going to affect your balance. So make sure you don't go 3 or 4 paces out of the machine to do that. When you're doing the cable crossover, it's very important that you don't extend your arms and your shoulders right back. We just want to get to the point where your elbows meet your shoulders, as in line with the shoulders. We pause there, and then what we do is we contract across the chest to then squeeze it in. A mistake a lot of people make is they pull with their arms or they pull with their forearms to try and get that movement going, and then that's immediately taken it off the chest. So the cable crossover is a lighter movement. We want to focus on contracting the chest and pulling the chest in, which then activates the chest muscles and then gets those working. Now, once we've done those, ideally for chest press on the cable crossover, you can do this 2 ways. You can do this either step forward in the same position. A lot of the time I like to step backwards and come more over, so it's more stimulating a flat bench movement. And the reason for this is that because there's no bench pushing on the back of your shoulders, you can get a nice deep stretch on the chest without the bench impinging into your shoulders. Now, if you've got a shoulder injury, you know how this feels, because your front delt will always be painful after you've done a pressing movement. You don't get that with the cable crossover because you get that stretch in, but obviously you're reducing the weight slightly, so you're not pulling on your shoulder too much. And then when you're pressing through that movement, because you pre-fatigued with the cable crossover, you're then really getting into the chest, and the chest is going to fail first before you start bringing in the rear delt, so the front delts and the triceps. So you can get a really good targeted movement without any pressure on the shoulder by doing that superset. The second superset I want to bring your attention to is using a Swiss ball. Now, I get mocked for this a lot. One of my friends, Matt, who's a powerlifter, one of my really good friends, he's always ribbing about this movement. But I can absolutely tell you it's one of the best movements I ever put into my chest routine, because the Swiss ball allows you to be supported all the way through the movement. Again, when we're on a bench, because the benches are normally quite narrow, when we're coming back for this movement, the bench pushes through and pushes through the shoulder, so potentially puts more pressure on the front delt, which can lead to the pec tears and stuff like that. So what the Swiss ball does, because the Swiss ball is rounded, if you sit on it correctly, so that you're at a decline sort of move, so you're in a decline or an incline position, whichever you want to call it, and your shoulders are supported. So when you come back for the Swiss ball fly, you can actually get really, really deep on the fly because your shoulders and arms are supported. So there's no extra tension across your shoulders there. And now, when you're doing this movement, especially for the press as well, you're going to have to really focus on the chest on this movement, because what a lot of people do is they use body language, or body movement I should say, to get the weight up. And if you do that on the Swiss ball, you're pushing energy back through the Swiss ball, and what's going to happen is the Swiss ball is going to bounce. So this exercise, as well as being good for targeting chest and supporting the chest, it also teaches you how to really focus the movement into the chest and not push it through the bench, so you're wasting energy doing that. Now, when you've done the Swiss ball fly, you then turn the hands, use the same weight, and then go for the Swiss ball press. Or you might want to increase the weight, it's up to you, but that would mean putting the weight down, picking up another one, and you've got to get a spot maybe to hold the ball. So I just go straight into the press with the same dumbbells. Now what I do is I come out massively wide for this. Now you can do this if you did this on a bench and you did that massively wide. The bench would then dig into your shoulder, so then you've got this arm out here somewhere, which is then having to hold the weight and putting a massive amount of maybe tension across the chest here, which potentially leads to an injury in the shoulder. With the Swiss ball, because it supports you, can come out nice and wide, get that stretch, same as how you would with a floor press, and then you can push against it to get this sort of outer chest coming into the movement. Now, again, with the Swiss ball, if you press too hard, you're going to bounce on the weight. So again, this teaches you to stop, think, and focus on the chest moving rather than trying to push yourself upwards, which is what a lot of people do, and then that goes back into the ball and you start bouncing. So this movement, really, really good. Generally use this as a sort of a beginning movement in the workout, maybe to warm up the chest, and then go on to say bench press or something else afterwards, because you can't get massive amounts of weight on this exercise. I mean, I've had some like 25 kilos on the Swiss ball fly before, which is quite heavy for a fly for most people. But yeah, that was tough. Generally, I'm talking about like maybe a 20% drop in the weight you can actually press, and a 20% drop in the weight you can actually fly on this one. I don't do heavy, really super heavy dumbbell presses anymore because of my shoulder injuries and a disc injury I had. But I have had up to say 35 kilos on the Swiss ball. But really, you don't want to be pushing that too much, because though the Swiss ball's rated like 1,000 kilos, if that bursts while you're pressing, that's not going to be a pretty sight. So don't let the ego take over on this one. It's very much a focus exercise, engaging the muscle properly. And if you're going to be lifting heavy weight, you're going to need some of that momentum to get it up again. So save that for the heavy weights and focus on targeting the chest with this one. Okay, the third exercise is more of a traditional sort of superset compound exercise, and that's a bench press, either incline or decline, incline, decline, or even flat, and then a dip. Now what I would say is I probably wouldn't do a decline chest press on this, because a dip generally tends to be a decline movement. So normally I will go for the incline bench press, either dumbbell or with a barbell, and then go for the dip. Now the reason for that is that if you're in an incline press, you're at that angle. If you're on a dip, you're at that angle in terms of the chest. So you got to think about where the movement's coming. When you're doing an incline press, the movement's coming up through the body, and then when you're talking about a dip, the movement's going down through the chest there. So we can focus on really hitting the lower and upper part of the chest. Although it moves all as one, you not really can target the chest like that, but because you're placing different angles on it, it's going to be different stimulation. And on this exercise, you can actually get a really decent amount of weight, because dips generally for most people tend to be an exercise they can rep out loads on, whereas bench press, you're talking about probably up to 10 for a maximum. Certainly most of my weights are 5 to 10 now. I don't go for like 1 rep maxes. I never really have. My weight range has always been between 5 and 10 for a barbell bench press, maybe a little bit more for a dumbbell bench press. But what I'm saying is you can get really heavy weight on the bench press movement and then go over to the dips and rep out a really decent amount of weight for, say, 15 to 20 reps to really fatigue the chest, which you wouldn't have been able to do using the bench press, because things like your triceps would fail, front delt would fail, and potentially risking an injury with that sort of thing. So a dip, you can just rep out as much as you can, and then it's very easy to stop if you get tired. Now I've got a dip machine at my gym. I generally tend to use that machine. I don't do dips on a bar, because I used to do those, but because of my shoulder injury, if I do that sort of dip where I'm holding my weight on my shoulders, that generally tends to lead to an aggravation of my injury. Now, with a dip machine, you're not really holding your body weight up, you're pushing it against the machine, so it's a little bit of a different stimulus, so I can get a decent amount of weight on that. So you might want to consider those 3 exercises, and if obviously if you're listening on the podcast, you won't see them, but on the video there are the videos here which you can watch at the same time, and I'll link all those exercises into the YouTube as well, so you can see them singly on my YouTube channel, and try incorporating those into your workouts at some point. Generally, I'll put the cable crossovers either as a starter or a finisher exercise when you're fatigued. Same with the Swiss ball. The Swiss ball, I'll probably go for a starter, because you do need an amount of balance and stability for that, which you won't have much of when you're coming to the end of your workout. And the bench press and the dips can be done as your main mass building exercise if you want to sort of soup that up a little bit. So try those out. Hope they bring you a little bit more interest in your weight training, in your chest training. If you've done them, let me know how you got on. Post in the comments, and hopefully it'll give you some more interesting chest workouts to do. Okay, if you like this video, please do like it, and if you want to see more of my videos, why don't you subscribe to that? Go and watch some of my playlists if you want. I've got playlists for all sorts of exercises, workouts, that sort of thing. Check out my YouTube channel, look at my website, lots of stuff there. And if you're on Instagram, why don't you check me out on Instagram, TomBlackman_nutrition. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.